So the Head Gravity Pro is the perfect racket for strong players who want to do a ton of damage on the tennis court.
The strongest. Put myself in there, maybe.
So since the Gravity Pro launched a couple of years ago, I have been a big fan. The campaign for a massive sweet spot was a bit suspect, especially once we found out that the mold was basically the same mold as the IG Speed MP. Now this Head Gravity Pro is actually the racket of choice of my buddy Simon Yu. I hope you've seen him on the channel. He does some shorts and helps out with a bunch of the reviews here. He's an integral part of the team and my life in general. So the Head Gravity Pro has made a huge splash on the professional tennis circuit, with players seeming to legitimately switch to it, like Zverev, Rublev, and Ash Barty. This is something we rarely see with new rackets that come out, so to see pros gravitate towards that gravity is really awesome, and it's a great indicator of what a good racket might actually be. So with that, let's hit the courts. So it was an absolutely freezing day on the day we filmed this racket, but I've played with the Gravity Pro a ton since it came out. I know this racket pretty well. So let's talk potential energy. Whenever I start with potential energy, I'm always looking straight at the swing weight. So we've got a 332 strung swing weight. That is a great spot for my game. I really like between 330, 340. And it's one of the few rackets that I really feel comfortable with playing stock. So it's really easy to just take that ball early, hit through the ball, penetrate the court, and a surprising amount of spin comes along with this. So long as you have pretty developed strokes, the Gravity Pro is really not going to hold you back on the tennis court. In fact, for me, it's one of the few rackets that I feel really comfortable playing with stock. It doesn't really need lead tape for me. I feel lots of confidence in my forehands, backhands. I can take it early, but it's still whippy enough that if I'm back in the court and deep, I can lob up a moon ball or something to try to get myself out of that hole. One thing that isn't really power oriented about this racket is the beam. So it's a pretty thin beam with a nice flexy 62 RA. I really like that RA in this racket. It feels like a really consistent layup. There's not a lot of sort of off feeling shots depending on if you hit outside the string bed or higher up towards the tip. I think that's what head really means with this massive sweet spot connotations, is that it's really consistent feeling across the string bed. It's not like the sweet spot is super powerful or anything. It's just that there's not a very large drop off in playability outside the center. So the scores for potential energy are 133. Now some similar competitors are going to be the Radical Pro at 125, so the same static weight, so a bit heavier but a similar string pattern is going to be the V-Core Pro 97D at 129, and then a much more power oriented stick, the Pure Strike Tour at 140, and that takes us to the Stringbeed Performance. So this is definitely my favorite part of this racket. That tight 18 by 20 pattern is really confidence inspiring. It really begs you to go aggressive, whether it be on topspin ball slices or flat shots. The ball really is not going to sail on you. I always feel like I'm in complete control of where each ball is going to land, and that's huge. It's no wonder a player like Rublev, who relies on that huge forehand to dominate points, it's no wonder why he switched to the Gravity Pro, because he can really trust it and you can see his huge confidence on the forehand. The other really interesting thing about the Gravity Pro is how wide that head is. So the crosses are super long, and what this means is it has a very tall or open spin window. Now, the larger the spin window a racket has, the steeper angle of approach you can take with your swing. So we all know that spin is not determined by the racket, it's much more determined by the stroke. So the steeper the angle of which you can swing up the back of the ball when you're brushing it means you should have a higher spin potential. So this spin window is definitely an underrated factor when it comes to spin potential, and this is what's really awesome about this Gravity Pro. So even though it's got that really tight 18 by 20 string pattern that offers unreal directional control, you can still lay on a huge amount of topspin and a huge amount of slice whether you're going for an aggressive slice or more of a defensive slice. So the scores for Stringbeed Performance here, we've got the Gravity Pro coming in at 87, the VCore Pro 97D at 78, so a lot more control there. The Radical Pro is a bit more forgiving on the string bed at 96, and then significantly higher launch angle, but still, I think because of that weight class and because of that aggressive balance, we have the Pure Strike Tour at 122. So that weight distribution is going to be a bit more aggressive, featuring a 330 swing weight when you look at similar rackets like the Radical Pro or the Pro Staff 97, both coming in at 315 grams, but boasting lower swing weights and balance points that are lower down the handle. Here we have something that's geared more towards that modern game, more towards players who need that higher swing weight. The Gravity Pro is one of the easiest rackets when it comes to taking balls early, taking balls on the rise, return of serves. It's super stable through contact, even if you're playing a pretty big hitter. I never felt like I was going to get pushed around the court by a bigger hitter simply because the Gravity Pro was too light. It's not that racket. It really is there for you and packs a serious punch. That said, maneuverability is not that strong. I would honestly be really open to switching to the Gravity Pro if that maneuverability was a bit higher, so that twist weight was a bit lower, but then we'd be sacrificing the amazing stability of this frame. I think it's really one of the best out there, and that really thin beam of the Gravity Pro means it's not super slow through the air. Like rackets like the Pure Strike Tour definitely feel a lot slower through the air. The Gravity Pro has a little bit of whip, but for real big spin players, I think it's not going to be maneuverable enough for you. So weight distribution is coming in at 137. Then we have the Radical Pro at 125, so a lot faster through the air. The VCore Pro 97D I put in at 332. I found that racket a little bit easier to swing, a little bit easier to whip up the back of the ball. And then finally we have the Pure Strike Tour, an absolute log of a racket, coming in at 142. So into the final thoughts for the Gravity Pro. I think this is a great choice for any advanced player. The way this racket blends amazing stability with decent maneuverability, and then on top of that you've got that really tight 18 by 20 string pattern with a wide spin window. This racket really is just going to suit a lot of players. Off-center shots, it swings great. On-center shots, it swings great. I think if you like to take the ball early and on the rise, this is definitely a good one to look out for. But if you really rely on spin and hit a super loopy ball, there's definitely better options out there for you. Now, if you feel like the Gravity Pro is not control-oriented enough, then you're going to want to check out the VCore Pro 97D.